What if the most important thread in the tapestry of your salvation was held in the hands of a woman the world had already discarded? Imagine standing on the precipice of total annihilation, hearing the rhythmic, distant thud of an approaching army that carries with it the very breath of God, and realizing that your only hope lies not in the high walls of your city, but in a scandalous betrayal of everything you've ever known. We often speak of the heroes of the Bible as though they were born with halos, but what if I told you that the woman who saved the lineage of the Messiah was a woman who sold her body to survive the night? There is a secret hidden in the Scarlet Cord hanging from a window in Jericho, a truth so radical and so offensive to the religious mind that it is rarely whispered from the pulpit with the gravity it deserves. You have been told she was a helper, a footnote in the story of Joshua's conquest, but the heavens see her as a cornerstone of faith. By the end of this journey, you will discover why God chose a prostitute to shame the kings of the earth, and how her desperate gamble in the dark became the blueprint for your own redemption in the light. The air in Jericho was thick, heavy with the scent of roasting meat, expensive spices, and the pungent, underlying odor of a city built on the sweat of the oppressed and the indulgence of the elite. It was a fortress of palm trees and pride, a jewel of the Jordan Valley shielded by double walls of such massive proportion that they seemed to defy the very gravity of the earth. To the people of Jericho, these walls were not just stone and mortar, they were a god. They represented the unshakable security of a civilization that had flourished while others crumbled. But beneath the surface of the bustling markets and the decadent temples of Canaanite deities, a cold, suffocating dread had begun to take root. It was a fear that didn't scream, but rather hissed in the quiet corners of the taverns. Rumors had drifted across the river like smoke from a distant fire, rumors of a sea parting, of a god who fought with thunder and plague, and of a nomadic people who had turned the wilderness into a graveyard for kings. The atmosphere was electric, with an impending sense of doom, a psychological weight that made every sunset feel like a countdown. In the shadow of these looming walls lived Rahab, a woman whose life was a series of transactions, navigating a world that used her beauty but despised her soul. Rahab's house was built into the very structure of the city wall, a liminal space that existed neither fully inside nor fully outside the social fabric of Jericho. Her life was defined by the threshold. She watched the elite pass by with their noses turned up, even as they sought the comfort of her rooms under the cover of darkness. She was a woman who knew the secrets of powerful men, a woman who had mastered the art of the mask, yet her internal world was a chaotic storm of longing and disillusionment. Every day, she looked out from her window toward the horizon, watching the dust clouds kicked up by the Israelite camp across the Jordan. She was a prisoner of her circumstances, shackled by a profession that labeled her unclean, and a culture that saw her as a commodity. But deep within her burned a flicker of divine intuition, a recognition that the gods of her fathers, the carved stones, and the bloody altars of Baal were silent and hollow. She felt the weight of her sin, not as a religious abstraction, but as a physical weariness that made her bones ache. She was waiting for something, or someone, to break the cycle of her shame, never realizing that the God of the Hebrews was already looking at her house as the only lamp burning in a city of darkness. Then came the night when the whispers became flesh. Two men, shadows among shadows, slipped through the gate and sought refuge in her house. They were not like the men who usually frequented her establishment. There was a gravity to their movements, a quiet, terrifying authority in their eyes that spoke of a mission far greater than the flesh. These were the spies sent by Joshua, men of the covenant entering the belly of the beast. The tension in that room must have been thick enough to cut with a blade. Rahab knew instantly who they were. The risk was absolute. In the brutal world of Bronze Age warfare, harboring enemy spies was a death sentence, carried out in the most public and agonizing ways. Yet, as she looked at them, she didn't see enemies. She saw an invitation. The king of Jericho soon heard of their arrival, for a city under siege has ears in every alleyway. When the royal messengers pounded on her door, demanding the men be brought out, The heartbeat of history paused. This was the moment of no return. Rahab chose to lie to a king to serve the King of Kings, hiding the spies under stalks of flax on her roof, while her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. And she said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. Joshua 2-9. KJV. In the quiet of the rooftop, under the vast, uncaring stars, Rahab made her confession. It was the first recorded confession of faith by a Gentile in the Bible, and it came from the lips of a harlot. She didn't just ask for safety, she negotiated for the lives of her entire family, her father, her mother, her brothers, and her sisters. She recognized that the God of Israel was not a local deity confined to a mountain or a temple, but the God of heaven above and earth beneath. This was the turning point, a cinematic shift where the victim becomes the strategist. The spies, moved by her conviction and her courage, gave her a sign, a scarlet cord. This thread, dyed the color of blood, was to be hung from her window. It was the boundary line of grace. As long as she and her family remained behind that cord, they would be spared from the coming storm. It was a covenant written in red, a shadow of the Passover lamb's blood on the doorposts of Egypt, signaling that judgment would pass over this house of ill repute. The days that followed were a masterclass in psychological torture. For 6 days, the Israelite army marched around the city in total silence, save for the blast of the ram's horns. Imagine Rahab, gathered in that small room with her trembling family, watching the silver line of soldiers circle her world. Her neighbors likely mocked her, or perhaps they were too paralyzed by the eerie silence of the invaders to notice the red string dangling from her window. Frame by frame, the suspense built. Each circuit of the city was a heartbeat closer to the end. Rahab had to maintain her faith in a promise made by 2 strangers, clinging to a piece of rope while the very ground beneath her began to vibrate with the power of an approaching God. On the 7th day, the silence broke. The shout of a nation rose like a tidal wave, a sound so primordial and powerful that the massive, unshakable walls of Jericho simply gave way. The earth groaned and buckled, and the pride of Canaan crumbled into the dust. But amidst the roar of falling stone and the screams of the dying, one small section of the wall stood defiant. Rahab's house, anchored by faith and marked by scarlet, remained upright while everything around it fell.
Now, we must peel back the layers of this story to reveal the shocking revelation that most sermons pass over. We focus on the walls falling, but we miss the scandal of the genealogy. If you open the Gospel of Matthew and trace the lineage of Jesus Christ, you will find a name that seems out of place: Rahab. This woman did not just survive Jericho, she was absorbed into the heart of Israel. She married Salmon, a prince of Judah, and became the mother of Boaz. Think of the radical grace required for a prince of the covenant to take a former Canaanite harlot as his bride. This means that Rahab is the great-great-grandmother of King David. The blood that flowed through the veins of the man who killed Goliath, the blood that would eventually flow through the veins of the Savior of the world on a cross at Calvary, was partially the blood of a Jericho prostitute. This is the hidden truth. God did not just save Rahab, He promoted her. He didn't just give her a second chance. He gave her a legacy that would outlast the stars. The scarlet cord in her window was not just a signal for the spies. It was a prophetic umbilical cord connecting the ruins of a pagan city to the birth of the Messiah. The lesson of Rahab is a devastating blow to the spirit of legalism that haunts so many of our hearts today. We often feel that our past disqualifies us from God's future, that the labels society has placed upon us, addict, failure, divorcee, outcast, are permanent tattoos on our souls. But Rahab teaches us that God is not looking for a polished pedigree, He's looking for a desperate faith. She didn't have a theological degree, she had a terrifying realization that God was real and she was not. Have you ever felt like you were living on the wall of a crumbling system, waiting for the inevitable collapse of your own making? Rahab's story asks you, what are you holding on to? Are you holding on to the stones of your own strength? Or are you clinging to the scarlet cord of God's mercy? Her life proves that your location does not determine your destiny. and your occupation does not define your identity in the eyes of the Almighty. Grace doesn't just cover your sins, it repurposes your life for the glory of a kingdom you once didn't even know existed. Furthermore, there is a profound lesson here about the weight of our influence. Rahab did not just save herself, she became a bridge for her entire household. Her faith created a sanctuary in the middle of a war zone. When the world around you is shaking, when the economy is failing, when culture is deconstructing, when the walls of modern society are showing deep cracks, will your home be a place marked by the Scarlet Cord? Do you have the courage to stand before your family and say, "I have heard of a God who is greater than our fear, and I have made a deal with His mercy"? Rahab's bravery reminds us that one person's decision to trust God can alter the trajectory of generations. Your private struggle with faith is not just about you, it is about the Boaz you will raise, the David who will follow, and the legacy of redemption you will leave behind. How often do we underestimate the power of a single act of obedience in a hostile environment? We must also confront the reality of the long wait. Rahab had to stay in that house while the walls were falling. She didn't run out to meet the Israelites, she stayed behind the blood-colored sign. This is the discipline of the transition. Many of us want the deliverance without the period of being shut in with our fears. True faith is the ability to sit still in the middle of a catastrophe because you know who holds the contract on your life. Can you trust the promise when the dust is filling your lungs and the screams of the old world are ringing in your ears? Rahab's psychological depth is found in her stillness. She moved from a woman of the night, constantly in motion to survive, to a woman of the word, standing still to be saved. This is the invitation to every viewer who feels the world collapsing. Find your scarlet cord, retreat into the promises of God, and watch as He preserves you in the very place where others are perishing. As we look at the ruins of Jericho today, they serve as a silent monument to the fact that nothing man builds can withstand the breath of God except that which is built on faith. Rahab's story is the ultimate beauty for ashes narrative. She walked out of the rubble of her old life and into the pages of the most important book ever written. She is mentioned in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews 11, listed alongside Abraham and Moses. Think of the divine irony. The harlot of Jericho stands shoulder to shoulder with the Father of nations. This is the heart of the gospel, that there is no pit so deep that His grace is not deeper still, and no reputation so tarnished that He cannot burnish it until it reflects the face of His Son. You are not your past. You are who God says you are. And if He says you are a vital link in His redemptive plan, then the gates of hell cannot prevail against that truth. I want you to take a moment and reflect on the walls in your own life. What are the structures you've relied on that are starting to crumble? Is it your career, your health, or perhaps a version of yourself that you've outgrown? The story of Rahab is your signal that it is okay to let the old world fall, as long as you are holding on to the right thread. You don't need to be perfect to be used by God. You just need to be available and willing to betray your old allegiances for the sake of His kingdom. Rahab's red cord is still hanging out the window of history, inviting anyone, no matter their background, no matter their sins, to come inside and find safety. The God who saw Rahab in the darkness of Jericho sees you in the complexity of your struggle, and He is ready to weave your story into His eternal masterpiece. If this journey through the life of Rahab has stirred something deep within your soul, if it has reminded you that your scandals can be transformed into your strength through the power of God, then I invite you to join our community. We are a gathering of people who believe that the Bible is not just a book of ancient tales, but a living map for our modern lives. Please subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss these deep dives into the lives of those who walked before us. Like this video to help us share the message of radical grace with those who feel discarded by the world, and share it with someone who needs to know that their walls don't have to crush them. Most importantly, leave a comment below. Tell us, what is the scarlet cord you are clinging to today? Let us encourage one another as we march toward our own promised lands. Remember, your story isn't over just because the walls are falling. For the person of faith, that's often exactly where the real story begins. May the grace of the God who redeemed Rahab be with you, providing a sanctuary in every storm and a future beyond your wildest imagination.